A very good morning to you. We've actually got a bit of sunshine, and this is another one in our series of motorhome mods, motorhome modifications, and this time it's the fitting of full VB air suspension. Now, those of you who are regular to the channel will know that on this motorhome, my own A Class Mobilvetta, we fitted VB semi-air comfort suspension to the rear of the vehicle about a year ago, which has been a fantastic addition to this Fiat-based A Class motorhome. And apart from obviously the significant improvements to ride and comfort, it also gave us a lot of those extra additions like being able to raise and lower the suspension, perhaps for ferry boarding, for pitching up on site, and a lot of similar functionality and useful functionality that has helped us over the last year or so in our European travels. So today we're looking at a full VB air suspension fit, not to Resi the Moho that I'm sat in, but to another motorhome, coach-built motorhome, a Chausson. It's an Alco chassis. It's on a Mercedes base, so a sort of Mercedes Sprinter base therefore, chassis. And we are here again in Northwich in Cheshire at A&E Leisure. Regulars to the channel will know that I use them for my VB semi-air comfort fitting. They were the winners, shall we say, out of all the research I did and the competitive quotes I got. And when we had it done here at A&E Leisure, we certainly haven't been disappointed by the workmanship that was involved, which was certainly attention to every detail of the fitting, and also the ongoing customer service that we've had from A&E has been outstanding. So first of all, our thanks to, of course, the team at A&E for allowing us to come and film this to add to our series of motorhome modifications that are on the channel. So of course check out the channel if you wanted to know any more about the other films. There's a VB semi-air comfort fitting on the channel, there's a full EP self-leveling kit fitting on the channel, and there are some front FSD struts and coil spring replacements on the front end suspension of a motorhome as well. So look out for those films on the channel as well. But this is full VB suspension, all four corners of a lovely Chausson motorhome, and of course our thanks to the owners of that motorhome, Stephen and Deborah, who have kindly allowed us as well to film the process of all their Christmases at once, getting their full VB suspension fitted. So without further ado, let's go and take you through the fitting process and let you know a few other bits and pieces about both the kit and about A&E Leisure. And here it comes for its birthday and Christmas, all in one go. Betty the Carthago, lovely sea tourer, just a three-year-old Mercedes Alco chassis, and we'll take you through the process of the full air fitting that's going to happen during the course of the next 2 or 3 days. Give you a good idea of what it involves. Good look under the van, good look at the system going on, so that by the end of it you should have a very good idea of what the VB full air offers. Also the quality of the workmanship here at A&E Leisure as well, which I know I do go on about a bit, but they were absolutely fantastic when we had our VB semi-air fitted. And if you've seen one or two of the other films on the channel, particularly the full EP levelling system, and also the one for the front struts and coil springs, you'll also know that Aaron here is doing a lot of the work today, and Gary will look after your pride and joy really well, and will not only fit well but also will provide that really good follow-on servicing and care if you need any support with your new product. Super service here at A&E Leisure up in Northwich in Cheshire. And up she goes. For, as I say, a pretty lengthy fit, 2 or 3 days. We'll be bringing you the highlights of the fit and all the key parts of the system. Look at that, Welsh Dragons up. All the highlights of the system, all the functionality of it, so that you'll have a really good idea of what, if you're fancying VB full air, of what sort of system and functionality you're going to get. A tremendous system, and a real benefit and a bonus to any motorhome. So there we go, the van is up. Aaron's just bringing the axle stands, ready to get the axle secured now. This one is an Alco chassis, and therefore instead of the standard leaf springs that you'd expect to see here at the back, you've got this process of torsion bars which are inside. There's 3 torsion bars inside this part of the axle here, secured by these bolts here, and they pivot on this point here, and obviously where the wheel is, and as the wheel moves up and down on bumps, then so the torsion bars twist and provide that suspension. So that's the sort of basic difference between the leaf springs and the Alco and the torsion bar process. Alco, incidentally, they first developed chassis for Fiat Ducato back in the 80s, mid-80s. And Alco actually comes from the German guy that sort of dreamt up the idea, Alois Kober. So hence the AL of Alois and the KO of Kober, Alco. And back in the 1930s, I think it was a locksmith company, and then over the next 50 years, it developed other aspects of its engineering expertise, which in the 1980s resulted in chassis development for the Fiat Ducato, and now obviously it's much more extensively used, and indeed the company expanded from Germany in the 1930s and expanded into Austria, I think, and then it went to other parts of Europe and then worldwide. So it certainly has become a pretty stratospheric rise, and are now a very popular system, the Alco chassis is. And part of the process of VB full air, of course, is to shift the reliance from the Alco process, from the torsion bar process that I've just described, to the VB full air system. What we'll do is take you through that and how that is achieved, and how then the 4 wheels become reliant on the VB suspension, full air suspension, rather than its existing Alco suspension that it starts its life with. And while we're waiting for those first bits to be done, an interesting tale as well. Stephen and Debbie, who have kindly allowed us to film their lovely Betty, having its full air fitted, also had an experience with another company who they had originally planned to have the work done with, who then didn't quite live up to the expectations that they were expecting, and delay after delay occurred with parts and ordering bits. And at that point they then found A&E Leisure online, saw our YouTube film of 1 or 2 visits to here at A&E Leisure, and that resulted in them making contact with Nathan here at A&E Leisure, who is part of the team here that would look after you on the phone and or give you any advice that you might need in respect of what you wanted adding or taking away from your van. On this occasion it's obviously VB full air, and they've now ended up changing their supplier from the one further down south to come to A&E Leisure to have the work done. So it sort of reinforces what I've said in our previous films and in this one already, is that the buyer experience here for us when we had the VB semi-fitted, and clearly for Stephen and Debbie in their journey so far to have VB full air fitted, is that the customer experience here was really key for me when I was spending so much money, as they are. And I just felt very comfortable with A&E, and I think they have as well, which is what's brought them here. So fingers crossed that all goes well with Betty over the next couple of days. So it's just another example of our experience, of now Stephen and Debbie's experience of why we chose A&E Leisure. So at very least, it's worth having a chat with Nathan and the team here if you're thinking of doing some significant modification work to your motorhome or caravan, because at very least they'll give you some really good advice, and at best you'll end up coming here to have a really good fitting job done. There we go, the new full VB full air, off the shelf, shelf full of goodies, look at that lot. And let's get it unpacked and ready for Betty the Carthago. There it is, the biggest box of goodies in the world. If you were a motorhome, you'd be getting excited now if you saw that lot coming for you. Well, what a box of goodies here, look at this. It definitely is Christmas. And birthday, all at once. The biggest book of instructions and documents. Glad I'm not fitting it. And these ones actually are front fittings for the full air. Underneath then will be our rear ones. And of course those front ones in the box there, they are going to completely replace our front struts. And let's get some light in there. They're going to completely replace our front strut and coil spring there. So hence you can start to see why it is such a 2 or 3 day job, because there is a lot of work going to go on in the next 72 hours. And here we go, there's our rear ones, second one there. And then we've got the air tank that we've just taken out of the box there. Obviously the wiring looms have got to go in. As you can see and start to get the feeling for now, there is a lot of kit and equipment to be A, taken off Betty the Carthago, and B, also put back on in the form of the full VB air suspension. These pieces here, they're the new supports. The airbag itself that we just saw in the box will sit there, and that will then sit sort of just to the rear of the axle there when we've got it installed. So the axle stands are in, hydraulic lifts are out, and then first job is to take all 4 wheels will be coming off eventually, because there's obviously, as you can see, there's quite some major structural change going on underneath at the rear here, let alone those struts and coils that I talked about that have got to come out at the front. So, and inside the casing here you've got those torsion bars, and the 3 that are in there are then replaced by 2 on each side. So that's taking away the reliance on the torsion bars and starting to put that emphasis more, as I say, on the airbags that will then do the suspension work once we're fitted. And these other parts here now that have appeared, so this piece here, that's what slides up inside the casing here, and that's into those. We just lift that one up a bit, you can just see, if I just put some light in there, there we go. So you can just see the receivers that that will take these 2 torsion bars for each side. And of course, one of the reasons why if you're booking your vehicle in here at A&E Leisure, this job would probably be set aside for 3 days. It can technically be done in 2, but if anything were to need more work, to more time, for example, 1 or 2 of these wheels at the rear here are pretty sticky and difficult to get off at the moment. So things that just slow the job down very slightly, the last thing they want is new jobs waiting to come in the door there and having to try and rush through to get your job finished. So it's another good example of the way A&E work here, is that they'll allow time for the job but then add on extra time as a safety factor, so that if there are any other jobs that appear as a result of trying to do the existing job, if wheels get stuck, if ABS sensors need replacing, various things that can go wrong when you start to take suspension and wheels apart, then they've got time to put those things right and to make sure that the time scale they've given you as the customer to come back in this case 3 days, is then realistic so that they can deal with any issues. Just another good example of the way they manage your expectations as a customer. So I just having to give it a little bit of easing spray because these wheels, having taken the nuts off, are absolutely stuck fast, which isn't uncommon apparently, so Aaron tells me. But they are well and truly fixed on there. So we'll just hopefully the easing spray will just soak its way in and allow the wheels to be removed. But it's a very good example of how time gets added to a job like that when things don't go quite according to plan. It's only, as I say, it's only a sort of 3-year-old vehicle, this one, but if the wheels haven't been taken off for those 3 years, then they can obviously, for various reasons, be it heat or wear and tear otherwise, just become really fixed on there. And probably this is a good place to find out the problem, not when you're in the middle of nowhere and got a puncture and you're trying to get your wheel off, because there's no way that would have come off once you had jacked up your vehicle and happily got your spare out, or your foam out, whatever it is, the spare it would of course be. Then the last place you'd want to discover that the wheel is lock solid is on that circumstance. So let's give this a bit of time and then let's let you know how it goes to ease this wheel off. So while we're waiting for the wheels to ease off a bit so we can actually get them off, then let's tell you a little bit about the finished article. This will be the remote control that will sit up near the drivers or in between driver and passenger, somewhere accessible to either driver or passenger, and it obviously gives you a number of options. So apart from just the ability to work as an anti-roll and to stabilise your travel and to make the ride much more smooth and comfortable, which of course the air suspension does, then it also provides some other functionality. Now, a lot of the functionality will only work when it's at low speed, sort of 10 mile an hour-ish, but the sorts of things it can do, as you can see here, these 2 buttons here, be it that one or that one, they're a type of ferry mode which allow you at the press of a button for either the front of the vehicle to be lifted or the rear of the vehicle to be lifted to maximum, so that as you go on and off those ramps on ferries or similar or steep driveways, then it lifts the front or the back of the vehicle, or indeed both. You can lift the whole vehicle up to allow your tow bar or whatever else is on the back to just have sufficient clearance so you don't catch the back end of your motorhome, because obviously they've got quite a big overhang, or some of them certainly have quite a big overhang at the rear. There is of course a service mode which allows the whole vehicle to be lifted up, just so you could perhaps get or see what's going on underneath. you've got a manual mode where you can actually then adjust front or rear, which of course for the up and down arrows. It's got, once you go above that critical sort of 10 mile an hour, then it goes into its sort of auto level mode, where it's set mode, where it'll then just take over and equalise itself, so you don't get that manual functionality or adjustment that we're talking about. But as I say, once it gets below that speed, then you get all these additional functions come into their own. There's a park function. This one here is a park function where it just takes all the air out the suspension. There's of course that one, as you can probably guess, is a water drain ability, where you could clear your grey or your fresh water out if you're clearing out for the season. You can just adjust it up and down so it actually physically tips the van and allows you to drain. So it's got a lot of other functionality apart from just the significantly improved ride that VB Full Air offers within the system itself. And we'll see as we go through the installation, you'll start to see how all that becomes reality on Betty the Carthago. So, with a good old friendly rubber mallet, a tool I'd know well, that managed tapping it all the way around the tyre repeatedly, and again with that easy spray it's finally dislodged it, but you can see the issue there. See that rust? Get close enough there for you to see it. It's got a bit more light there. The rust that's developed there on this 3-year-old vehicle, which has caused that to jam on. And what they'll do here at A&E is they'll emery all that down, clean it all up, spray it down once the system goes back together again, so that hopefully it tries to prevent that for future wheel removal. But as I say, just again the issue that you'd get if you were on the side of the road trying to change a spare wheel. I mean, there's absolutely no way that would have come off, and you'd have ended up calling out your breakdown service probably to help you nudge the wheel off and somehow get it off. Just one of those little complicating factors that we're presented with when working on vans. So next job is, now we've got that sticky wheel off, is to get the calipers off, which are again pretty well fixed on, but with some seriously good extension bars on the wrenches, then that's not a problem to get them eased off. Yeah, that one's certainly a lot less sticky than the wheel itself was. And then if we look at the wheel that's come off as a result of those rubber mallets and the easing spray, you can see the issues here that causes that to just stick in place. But one of those things. So what Aaron's doing now is, because this is a 3-year-old vehicle, it's got an electronic parking brake system. So, of course, when you take the wheels off and calipers off, the last thing you want is the parking brake reactivating, because it'll push the parking brake pistons out, or the braking system pistons out. So we've got to stop the parking brake system coming back on, either in service mode or by just removing the negative terminal of the battery once the parking brake is released. But of course, the single piece rubber mat that fits all the way across the cab here has got to be taken out, and then Mercedes put a steel plate then over the battery bay, a bit different to our Fiat. If you remember some of our films, we've got the little removable hatch where Aaron's sort of about where Aaron is now on our Fiat, which you just lift up and then that gets you to the battery, whereas you've got this screwed in full size rubber mat. Then you've got the steel plate, which Aaron's taken off now, so to pop off the negative terminal. So again, other really clear reasons as to why they build in 72 hours rather than trying to cut it shorter back to 2 days or less. to get all these little jobs done so they can be done right. So there we go, the caliper's off, just cable tied there to hold it out the way. And then off with the disc. And again, just a little tap with a good old rubber mallet. Same issues that were holding the wheel on, a little bit of corrosion in that. There we go. And again there, get a little bit of light on. Just see that, a bit of corrosion in that that's holding that was holding that disc on. And then tucked away here, this little bit here, that's your ABS sensor, which just plugs in here to its little receiver there. Just got to be really careful with those, these are quite sensitive parts. Make sure they don't get affected, damaged in any way that affects the sensor itself. And then we've got to take off the whole disc assembly as well. And then a lot of the bolts that Aaron's taking out here, they come, the system, or the kit I should say, in that massive cardboard box we saw, comes with a lot of replacements. So yes, some of the ones we're taking out are a bit corroded and a bit fixed in there, but of course they get some nice new bolts, plus they get obviously a little coating of the treatment as well when they go in. But crikey, what a massive selection of new bits and pieces to go on the vehicle.
What's that I need to protect anyway?
A little bit of light in there. Yeah, all those little bits of corrosion that are causing Aaron all that strife with getting some of these bits and pieces off and the bolts out. But that is motoring in Britain for you. So, and there's the Bible that Aaron and Gary are working to. Fitting instructions, 63 pages, and we've only got to page 8. Got a few to go. So, next one's out, and these little bolts. It takes this hub unit off. And this bit actually gets reused on the new system. And the next bit off. Again, everything has been well and truly not welded, but feels like it's welded on. It's taken such a job to shift every bit and loosen every bolt. Who'd be a vehicle engineer, eh? Now the shock absorber coming out. It's a full-on dismantle job, this one. So the shock absorbers that are coming off here, they are replaced as part of the kit. In fact, they're in the white box there. So, and it's almost like a one-for-one, but again, it's just a bit like got the replacement bolts and nuts and all of that to go back on then. So they've got replacement shocks as well that go on as part of the overall kit. You can now see as well, now it's stripped down, these actually are those 3 bolts that are on the ends of the torsion bars that we talked about earlier, that sort of do the work of the current suspension system before the VB's gone in. So, torsion bars unwound. So, and then these final 2 bolts coming out, which then allow the torsion bars, and these pieces just to slide out then.
You say slide that.
So there we go. So there's the first of the torsion bars, just coming out. There we go, torsion bars out. Now you can start to see why the replacement looked like that. So finally into the, almost at the last of the dismantling bits before we start rebuilding. And there we go, you can just see down the end there. A liberal dosing of grease in there, isn't there, eh? Good old yucky stuff. Could have done with a bit more of that on some of these outer parts. Might have been a bit less sticky. Time for some good honest re-greasing of the new parts. Fabulous stuff. Your favourite, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah.
Makes it look easy, doesn't it? Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, we talked about the three bars that have come out, and there's then only two that go in each side. But of course, you sharp eye will have noticed that there's also 3 holes in the new one. So they actually supply a bung to fill up the unused hole. And at the moment, not quite sure why that is, but it's obviously something to do with the fact that the air suspension takes over from the, or begins to take over priority over the torsion bar process that it originally had fitted and that we've taken out. So, but of course that's why I'm not an engineer, because I expect there's some very logical engineering explanation for it. And in fact, if you know, or if you work for Alco, then stick it in the comments below and tell us the engineering that goes behind that. 2 bars back in, 3 bars come out. And the other thing, of course, which Aaron has just pointed out, is the new one, which is our one with the white tape on. And they are colour coded, so white and red is for the near side, and then we've got the yellow and white for the off side. But you can see they're very slightly thinner profile than the old ones. These 2 here are the old ones, that's the new one there. So yeah, some interesting engineering science behind it. And a bit more of the good old grease on the new ones. And then the same adapted slide hammer to ease them back into 2 out of the 3 holes. There goes the new one. And then a bit of jiggery pokery and fiddling to get it positioned on that one at the far end that we know is all the way down the end there. So 2 taps later, and there's the first one in, lined up and in. There's the second bar going in, or the second and final one we should say. And Darren's just getting the new shock absorber back in place with the fittings that we took off a little while ago. And the second bolt in. There we go, second one tapped home. The second and final one, we should say, tapped home. And then it's always this lower right side that gets the bung instead of the bar. And there's the bolt just going back in, and that bolt goes in and lines up by crossing over that notched area at the far end of the bar that's down the end of the tube there, before then being finally tightened, which in effect therefore just holds those bars in place and well and truly wound up, as you can see there. And there we go, there is the third bung. And it's as simple as that, a sort of nylon bung that fills up the final hole. So the next job is to take out, there's 2 big bolts at the top there, and then there's another couple under here, because that square of bolts, if I can call them that, corresponds with the fittings that go on the new one. That, if you remember, is the holder for the airbags, which are, where's it gone? Well, there's one over there, that sit on that unit there. So that's old bolts out. And then, as we've started to get used to it, the VB kits, new bolts supplied to when it all goes back together. These ones are coming out a little bit easier than some of the wheel fittings and the discs that we took off earlier, which is a good thing for Aaron here. Of course, accessibility though is another matter, as he's got to stick his hand down the back there and try and get a spanner on the other end of this hefty old bolt. Got to be an M14 or even an M16. So you've got to be a contortionist again to get to the right bolts. So that's our first of our, or I should say second if you count that as our first, second of our new bits going on, which is then just fiddled in with those. There's our new bolts going in. There we go, so there's the bolts in, and then our ones under there, wound up, and just about, and then obviously they'll be torqued to taken right up to the tight limit. And that getting torqued up, and of course the good thing is you get all your torque settings, absolutely everything. And incidentally, we're now on to page 12 to 13 of the 63-page manual. So very detailed kit, the VB, and having seen it, if you've not seen the film of the VB Semi-Air going on to my own A Class, then do check that out as well on the channel. But I remember looking in detail at the kit then and all the bits of it as it went on, and thinking that the kit was actually very well thought through and very well put together. So certainly, and this one is no exception either. So they're great bits of kit the way they're put together, and hopefully Aaron, who has to fit it, and Gary think the same as the fitters of it as well. So next piece on is this bit, which is the bottom of the bracket of the top part we've just fitted in there, and then Aaron's just cable tied the caliper up out the way there so he can work on this bottom half. Again, some hefty old M16s going in there that of course also get torqued up. All getting torqued up, and then when torqued they get the magic red dot there to show that they've all been checked and torqued. Again, it's all those little details, isn't it? Every bolt checked, every bolt marked with a red dye to say they've been done. Good detail, that, good detail. There it is, the magic paint going on. Another 4 checked. Torqued to 180, these ones. That's a fair old winder on M16, that is. That ain't going nowhere. You'll be pleased to know that, Stephen, when you're driving it. And the cover cap just going back on for the torsion bars, which are obviously underneath that. 2 torsion bars this time, not 3. And next thing on, the little bump stop just being fitted here, ready to be tightened. So first to the air piping, and then the air piping comes out of a little slot in the side there. So once this is then turned into position, and there Aaron just started to feed the air pipe off into the chassis to take it up towards the compressor. So there you see with Aaron just using some air to extend the bag a bit there, or the bellows, for want of a better word, just so he can get to the base of the unit there. So it's filling it up with air there, see, and extending as we go. So you can now start to get the feel of what the process is and how it works and how it creates that suspension. And if you look on the side there, it's got a maximum rating of 130 psi, so that is a serious amount of air you can put into that bag. And then that little bag is secured by the nut under there. And then once we've got the system on and start to pump the pressure up, then the sleeve comes down over this section here, which eventually will be further up once it's back in running order. And here's some conduit just being fitted over those. This, you know, you can see it's quite thin air pipe, this. And one of the things that I noticed when they did our VB semi, and also of course now when they're doing this, and in fact when they did that EP levelling, which if you haven't seen that film on the channel, take a look at that as well for a full levelling system. But the feature of that was that these have been fitted, I've seen them fitted without conduit on them, without that extra protection, and therefore it's just another little one of those belt and braces things which just makes sure that all the key components are protected as they run along under the chassis here, with that extra conduiting on for the to protect the pipework. They're good touches, and another reason that brought us here for our fitting. What Aaron's just fiddling in here is, let's just put a bit of light in that, just fiddling in that little piece now. Now that is being the smallest piece, of course, is one of the most important. That's the height sensor that's going in there. So when we were talking earlier about its ferry mode and its ability to raise it, lower it manually, or indeed its running mode, which is an auto function, then those height sensors are the things that tell the brains of the system where to set the wheels and where to set the bags to ensure that it's getting an optimal ride height. So an important little bit of a kit going in there. So, and those are just 4 little sleeves that get a bit like dowels, I guess, which allow that hub piece that we took off earlier to then fit back on. It just helps to locate it in the correct position. So there's the original piece of the hub has gone back on now. Takes sort of 4 little sort of dowel type pieces, which get inserted in the new piece. Then this gets pushed in on top before it obviously finally gets bolted in. So onto the offside, had the wheel over there soaking in good old easing spray overnight, and that helped to get that one off. Still a bit sticky though. But underway on dismantling the offside now, ready to get do exactly the same as we do over the other side. As a point of note as well, this is only a 3-year-old van, but the issue's getting the wheels off because of this, where they've stuck around the hub here and sort of almost fused themselves on, caused a real struggle. So it's a point to note and a reminder to myself to make sure my wheels are taken off relatively regularly and just eased up and emeryed down if necessary, because otherwise they'd never have come off if I had a flat. Gradually working through, hub off, disc off. These bolts sprayed last night with a bit of ease off, so coming off slightly easier. There's the offside shock absorbers just been loosened off as well, so we're gradually getting there, dismantling the unit on this side. There's our three torsion bars that have been tapped out, you remember, from the near side, and only 2 to go back in. Here we go, that lovely grease stuff. Standing well clear of that. Don't want to get it on my Crocs. And in the van, what a nightmare that would be. Ready for insertion in there. That's our new torsion bars going in. The second one going in. Plus, Aaron's just popped a bit of Loctite on there, which is great. Just again, belt and braces fitting. And then Aaron will do a quick check to make sure that the bolt under there has grabbed the end of the 2 torsion bars by just giving it a wiggle and seeing if it will pull back out at all. Obviously, if it doesn't, then it's held tight. So no movement on that at all, which means that it's grabbed the single bolt there has grabbed the end of the torsion bars, and then the existing frame coming off, which will be then replaced by our new piece there. There's the supports for the bag going in. It's the new shock in position there. Just starting to get some of the bolts back in. New bolts, of course. The final torque up of those bits and pieces. And just then starting to get the air pipe threaded. Black for the offside. And then again it will get put into some of the conduit to protect it. So just put a bit of air into these. There we go. To enable them to then be fitted to the onto the base plate there. And that air bag, the air line, just coming out the top there and then disappearing off into the chassis. A bit more of the rebuild. That's the original part of the hub that's reused in the process. Just as the rear and ear side all coming back together. Just a bit of clean up going on, get all the dust and bits and pieces out there with a bit of magic spray before the reassembly. Now, good old clean up time so that hopefully the next time that wheel comes off it won't be as sticky. Some magic easing spray, good old emery papering. That's a bit like some of those extra touches or just, you know, professional touches I was talking about earlier with the job overall that just makes that difference that everything's finished right. The follow-up, incidentally, you know, if there ever were any issues and you're with installation from A&E is also excellent in that they won't just wave you away and then abandon you. So any follow-up issues at all they deal with very effectively. So next, one of the next prep bits is getting the cabling that controls the height sensors on the full out. Just getting that routed through the chassis back to the bags here. Threading wires, clipping them up. Caliper there still yet to be fitted back on. We come around the back here, you can see there's already a fair amount of cabling that runs down this Alco chassis. And then this is the one that, it's the sensor cable, the height sensor cable, that obviously has a second one over this side, which Aaron's just started to feed into the chassis, and then you can see it's taped together here from the plug there, which heads for the control center, which at the moment is the unit down there on the ground. That's all the wiring looms that then go back to the sort of the brains of the system. So in there you can start to get the flavour now. So that's the sensor wire plug that's just come in through the chassis there that Aaron's threaded in. That's now plugged into the sensor assembly, which is there. There's your height, which is connected to this part of the sensor, which is the thing that detects what height the wheel is at. And then if the wheel obviously needs to go up or down or back to its neutral position, then it sends the signal, it sends the height information back to the sensor, which then goes back to the brains of the system to tell it to either inflate or deflate the airbag via the compressor, which obviously is part of the brains of the system down there, which is yet to go in. And it's as sort of straightforward as that, really. So another piece of cleaning up going there before the wheel goes back on. And if by magic, wheel back on, offside just about there. And there we go, wheel 2 back on. So with the wheel back on now and the weight taken by the jacks, it's just brought the suspension back up to this fitting here, and this piece that was fitted on earlier by Aaron, this is our 0 point, if you like. So you bring the wheel back up until this piece is touching the upper part of the VB system there, and that is now the 0 point, which will eventually go back into the brains of the system to tell it where 0 is. And then once 0 is established, then this piece will get taken back out again. Okay, so next job, got our air tank there and the support that they provide. And look at this, we're up onto, what are we on, page 26 now? Working our way through is Aaron. And we've got to fiddle it into this gap here on this Mercedes Alco chassis. So they give you a little nut which you've got to fiddle into that gap there. They give you another piece here which you've got to feed up in, and then that's the second bolt point for the frame. So all fiddly stuff. Need the smallest fingers in the world to get in and out of all these little nooks and crannies, but it certainly lends itself, the shape of this void under the van, to fit in that. Anybody would have thought they thought about it, wouldn't you? Fantastic. There we go, there's the first one going in to hold the frame. There we go, absolutely solid in there. Ready to take the air tank. Although that has to be one of the fiddliest nuts in the world to put on, that top one. And just prepping the air tank there. There we go, offered up the air tank. Just getting its brackets secured. There we go, solid as a rock. That is going nowhere. Then the first of the airlines going in. So having done that, we obviously need the compressor to fill it with air. Bit of framework there, compressor there. So there's the compressor support going in on the upper 2 bolts. So getting torqued up, finished off. 120 on those. Yeah, and certainly gets the compressor right up into that recess then, so that it's certainly not the lowest thing on the chassis, which is probably, in fact, there's probably a number of things that are at a similar height, including the water tank and 1 or 2 other bits. Bit of magic red dye to show they've all been torqued up. Good self-checking. So there's the compressor unit. It's got its black cover there, which we've taken off, which allows me, before Aaron fits it, just to show you the setup. They're obviously all colour-coded, the pipes, and you can see they're marked here as well. Rear right, rear left, RL, FL, front left, FR, front right. And the air pipes will come into those 4, and then these 4 take their own pipe, and they go they're actually going to go up through the bonnet, and they go to it's an emergency backup. So the pipes will come out of those, and then they will. We can see it in the bag here. Yeah, there we go. So they'll come up through into the bonnet. This plate will be fitted under the bonnet. These valves will then be fitted to it, and this is just like a standard car tyre, which in the event of your compressor system failing, you've got literally, you could put like a car tyre inflator on them to be able to then get the suspension or adjust or inflate the suspension to the appropriate level if all else fails. So yeah, so quite good to have a sort of manual, if you like, a manual backup, albeit you need an air pump, of course. And then of course colour coded as well, so that yellow pipe that came from the air tank there, that's obviously going to correspond with the yellow straight in there. So it's a well put together kit, isn't it? So there we go, that's the compressor being offered up to its frame with the bolts then, all four corners. Aaron's just fitting now. A recess here that was clearly made for the compressor. So first of the conduiting going on our tank to the inlet back there. Gets those airlines nicely protected under the van here. And there we go, the first, that's the yellow air pipe from the tank. Just trimming it back, Aaron. Ready to be fed into the intake. And then as you push the pipe into these fittings, and the one that we've just pushed on there, then there is a sort of one-way olive inside the fitting there, which once you've pushed it all the way home, it just stops it being able to be pulled back out again, and keeps it nice and firmly in the fitting there. Now starting to conduit the air piping that's going to come up from our rear wheels into the compressor here. All getting cable tied in now, and then all trimmed up and cut off. You can see now we're under here as well the significant change that the system makes to all of the suspension under here, with all the new fittings that were put on in the last few hours' work. Certainly a significant change to the vehicle's overall suspension. And while we're on the subject of the backup system that goes up under the bonnet there that I mentioned, then a reminder there as well that together with the backup for if the air failed, then if the air failed and the bag's deflated, then those two torsion bars, the lighter weight torsion bars that went back in to replace the three torsion bars that were taken out, those two are lighter weight, and the way VB would describe it is that the air now takes 80% of the suspension to do its bit and to improve the ride quality of the vehicle. But in case of failure, those two lighter bars that went back in there, those are the sort of 20% that allows you still therefore to drive the vehicle quite safely, and or get to an authorised dealer if you were to ever get a problem with the air intakes. And then feeding up with the conduited airlines is also our power supply as well. That you remember comes from the sensors, the height sensors that we talked about earlier on in the film. So that's then obviously got the plug that comes back into the compressor to tell it, all the brains of the system that tell it where level is and where up is and where down is, when the corresponding buttons are pressed on that remote control that we looked at. So there we go, that's all it conduited in, it's all being cable tied off, runs up past the water tank, through the chassis member there, coming in over the top of the compressor unit, and we'll get linked up into there. So there we go, there's the emergency backup. 4 valves fitted into the plate, and then the plates just fitted up under the bonnet, which I'll show you when I just pop that on. So there we go, popped in there, that's your backup inflation, and then takes it back down there, down into the engine bay, out through the bottom, and then clipped in underneath. Avoiding, of course, avoiding anything hot. So onto the front then, so the wheels off, and just started loosening off the bolts of the, taking out the bolts, this one here, of the existing strut, ready to then drop it out. There we go, so our little magic tool there to help that spring compression so that it can be taken out. And then talk about unique tools for a single job. This is the bit that fits on top of the strut and allows you to undo it. You won't use it probably for anything else in your life except for that job. And the top of it is accessed in through the bonnet. Remember when we did on the other film where we did the front springs and coil, then it was accessed from inside. This one is accessed a bit more straightforwardly from the engine bay. There you go. See, you can now see where that funny shaped tool fitted, but relatively accessible. And then once everything's loosened off, then it's a case of just tapping this whole assembly away from the strut itself, and then it can be jiggled out in true jiggling style, of course. So Aaron's just getting the level sensor ready for fitting to the van, which will be the level sensor that communicates with the rest of the system to tell it where level 0 is and whether to go up or down from level 0, which is all then part, ultimately, the calibration process. Once everything's together, this device that Aaron's got there will get calibrated to the level on the spirit level, literally on the spirit level in the van. And once the spirit level says it's smack on, then that will be calibrated into that sensor that's going on a level surface under the van, which will then memorise what level is. And then in the future, when the system wants to know or needs to be told where level is, you press the button and it goes back to the memory of what was on the spirit level setting. That gets glued up under the van there, and of course some electronic wizardry that comes from it back into the wiring loom. So that's the wiring loom heading for its exit up into the driver's area. So in the other part of the wiring loom, let's get a bit of light for you, The other bit of the wiring loom, which is coming up from down below here, is coming into the back of here. So Aaron's just loosened off one of the fuse lines. It's basically creating a new fuse in here, new position for the system itself. So that's one of the aspects of the wiring loom that's going in. And we're just up on the driver's side, just below the driver's seat there. And you of course can see that not only the back here, but then all the floor that's come up in here, the battery box we had to access, the cabling that comes up through there for the other part of the wiring loom. It's a significant job, and you can probably, after watching most of this film, you can see why it's such a fairly lengthy fitting process in terms of hours. And on the plus side, of course, we're up to about page 40, so out of that monster manual, getting there. As easy as that, old one out, ready for the new bag. And what Aaron was doing just there is just making sure none of that sealant was too far out, so that it snags the new, much larger bag that's going in there. Just making sure nothing is touching or rubbing once it's fitted. And in goes the new one with...
It's the new cap, is it?
Yeah.
Gary up top there, just getting the cap on the top.
For a bit of air in it.
That's it, Bob.
So excuse the noise that while the compressor was going, but you can see just put a little bit of air into this, which allowed that to push back down so it could be relocated into the hub here, and then just got these bolts loosely back in place. So that's the swap from one to the other, and you can straight away get the feel now of what's going on with the so-called that strut, the coil spring all gone, replaced by the airbag. And there's the new one, just very similar to the old, as you can see. Undone and done up with that incredibly fancy one-time use tool only. The only job it's ever used for. So what Aaron's been popping in here, fitted on this bracket, but to get to that, you've got to take or loosen off this bit to allow you to get to the underside of the nut. And then from there to this point here, that's the ride height sensor bar that will get fitted in there, and that then obviously works on that 0 point that I was talking about, where once it's commissioned and calibrated, that's how it'll tell what the level of each wheel is at. So there we go, that's the two pieces joined now with the sensor bar there, ride height sensor there. And then what Aaron's fitted coming out the back of the box there, you might just be able to see the coloured wire, which is obviously the part of the loom then that goes from the sensor back to the brains of the system. So now on with the airline. Front rear side was the blue, a bit of conduit around it. And off that will go back to the compressor. And front rear side done, wheel going back on. He definitely makes it look simple, this. But I can assure you, it's definitely not a do it on your drive job. if you're ever thinking about trying it. And finally, time for the front offside. There's the front offside one before it goes in. And some serious leaning on these big old M16 odd bolts, nuts to get them undone. There's that spring compression tool as well, which then will allow it to be unscrewed from the top and then dropped out for the final wheel. Just taking off some of that excess filler so it doesn't snag the new airbag. So, new one going in. Gary's ready up top to screw on the cap. Let's get some light in there. Yeah, that's light. That's got it.
Put some air in it as well.
There we go, starting to put that back together again. Roll bars and track rod ends reconnected and you can just see there, the base coming right through at the bottom. That tells you that it's seated all the way home. And there we go, that's the ride height sensor fitted as per the other side. And the offside wheel going back on. Still a bit of work to do with the airlines. So using the emergency fill points that you remember were under the bonnet in case of failure of the main compressor, Aaron's just tested the bags, put a couple of bar pressure in them, so you can now start to see that is absolutely tight as a drum, almost as tight, well, as tight as the tyre itself. But that's got a couple of bar in now. And then if we can see one of the front ones, might be a bit harder to see. Oh yeah, you can just get a view up there. See the inflation of that one as well. So they're obviously all holding well. That's the new air cable coming down under the arch. Progress. So there's our airlines now connected up. All colour coded as you've seen going in. And then starting to tidy up all the cable runs up at the front here. all cable routing there, going across the base of the engine bay and routing all those airlines back to our compressor. And there you go, there's the that's the casing going back on. Obviously still leaves these bits exposed there, but they're well protected up in that little recess there. So there we go, cabling tidied up, running off around the van. So we're almost ready to bring her back down again. Everything tucked away, wiring loom tucked away. The wonder of zip ties, which tidy up all the wiring and the looms. And the air cables. Not far off the point where we're heading for final wiring, because obviously now this is where a lot of this has now got to come into the cab. Some will go onto the battery itself. Other bits, of course, will go across to that fuse box that we saw yesterday and be connected up there. And then out the back of the compressor, it's just a little piece of pipe which actually dead ends at the end there. It's just open at that end, a little filter there, and that's like a sort of breather pipe that just eases some of the pressure that perhaps builds up within the system, allows it to vent somewhere. So, the first time in a couple of days, she's on the way down. It's been well into a 3-day fit, this one, because of some of the, mainly because of some of the sticky components that we had, the wheels that were really difficult, super difficult to get off at the back here, and some of the parts that are obviously taken off to be replaced by the VB kit. So that certainly caused a delay or two in easing all those up, but where there's a will there's a way, and down she comes, ready for some of the final work. And the wiring is no straightforward matter either, with the driver's seat off, and then finding routing for it, all to come through under the seat to create the new fuse for it at the front here, or at the side of the seat here, and then the wiring that obviously goes back towards the near side of the vehicle, then down through the hole that is directly underneath the passenger seat where a lot of the other loom goes, and feeding it all through. So as you can see from the front here, again, it's a pretty significant job inside the cab here. So this is just building up the new fuse spot on the existing fuse box, using one of the blanks, obviously. There we go. That's the wiring into the back, and then back into the fuse holder that was loosened off earlier. 3 amp and a 7.5 amp going in. So that the speed sensor is fitted correctly, it goes up and fits right up under the sort of cowling, or the equivalent, if we look at this side, the equivalent of under this part over on the near side of the vehicle. There's obviously a stack of wiring and plugs in there, and that's where this speed sensor gets plugged in over the other side there, and that basically is the thing that determines that once the vehicle goes over a certain speed, then obviously the system can't be used, and that's something like 10 mile an hour, I think. But yet again, some fiddly old wiring runs to get everything connected, particularly, of course, the speed sensor is an important part of the system. So the remote now has got to be wired back into the loom that came up through the passenger seat over there. So the wiring is coming back through under this seat, out the base, and then back into part of the loom that's part part of the loom that's set up for it. There is some serious fiddling around to do under these mats and seats and cables, and way more than I imagined, that's for sure. So, and that one fuse just in between the green and the grey one over there. That's the extra one over there that's had to be added into the battery once you've got the cover off the battery surface. That is a lot of spaghetti in there, isn't it?
Yep.
A lot of spaghetti. So that's the inline fuse put onto the battery. There's an earth that's gone to an earth bolt under the passenger seat, and that's almost the wiring all sort of set up in here now. That was, as I say, a lot more complicated than I was imagining. So, negatives reconnected, time to start plugging in and commissioning. Handbrake's reactivated that we detached earlier, so that's great news. And now it's just going through the usual sort of software updates when you first switch on anything new and computey. So we're plugged in from remote to laptop onto VB's system remotely, and now it's just a case of starting to program all the kit and equipment that we've been fitting to the vehicle and then start the calibration process. So I've got the van back down on the ground now, because part of the calibration process is obviously it's starting to get that 0 point that I talked about earlier when the van was up in the air. I have to set that 0 point into its memory. Remote control lighting up now in maintenance service mode. And the calibration process, when the rear bags were fitted, there is a bar that is inserted into the as part of the process, which allows you to preset at the height. The bar holds the wheel at the 0 height. The front, however, isn't supplied with calibration bars, and you have to literally set it up with trolley jack each side, and then there are specific millimetric measurements that go from the bag to the base of the unit, which under the wheel arch there, which Gary and Aaron are just getting spot on to the millimetre, and then once they've got the vehicle set at that height, that's when they tell the brains of the system that it's at 0. The vagaries of computer technology. And obviously I've been using the terminology the 0 point, but of course that would be what they'd also call the ride height. So it's that memory of when you've perhaps had the vehicle raised up, raised down, whatever it may be. It's always, once you get underway, everyday use, it's got to go to ride height, so that's that 0 point that I'm describing. And Aaron's working through all the calibration numbers, programming them into the remote, and then saving the settings that we've talked about for each wheel. You can just hear the compressor now. Starting to put some air into them.
Because they've been resting on cow support, so I haven't really needed to alternate and just build more.
So I'm just going to try a little, see if we can get some sort of reading off the back now that we've got it set. So I'm just taking it off the bumper there. Right, that's at its fully lowered position, so we'll say, you can see the tape there. Alright Gary, take it up. So we were sort of 515 to 520. So you can hear the compressor kicked in. 515 to 520, we're now up at, still going up. And the tape measure is sort of moving up and down very slightly because it brings up obviously the back and then the front. So you can see the tape's going back down again now. That's because it finished with the back and then it was lifting the front. So is that about it?
Yeah.
Is that about it, is it? Yeah, so I think we're in sort of off-road mode now, so you can see there that we're coming in at.
Now the way to get it higher than that would be to drop the front as well.
Yeah.
So that would be, so it'll pivot the back.
Yes.
And that's what it does in the ferry modes, is it raises the back, drops the front.
Yes, right.
More
yeah.
height at the rear.
Yeah, if you weren't picking that up on the mic. If you now drop the front, then obviously the back will come up even more for ferry work. But you can see that sitting now. That is just under 615. We started at 515. So that is between 610 and 615 on that same point on the back bumper. So that is, I mean, that's just coming on to 100 mil. So that is a damn good lift. So hopefully you got a sort of flavour of it there. There would have been, as you might have picked up on the mic there, Gary saying, on the ferry, if we had been at that top off-road height, which was showing it at just a fraction under 100 mil, if you then drop the front, you would have got that pivot effect then, so the back would have probably come up, well not probably, but would have come up a bit more, so we would have probably taken the back end then over the 100 mil mark. So I mean that's quite a significant change in the in vehicle height, isn't it? If you remember, or if you've seen the VB semi-air comfort that we had put on our A class, you remember that was sort of 60 to 70 mil that gave us in terms of rear lift, which has done us well on the ferries and pitches and stuff like that, quite apart from the improved ride height. But obviously this now has provided, as you've seen there, even more lift on the back. But of course what you're also getting that you're not getting with mine is that it lifted it to about 90 to 95 mil at the back there, but of course it had also lifted it the same amount at the front. So that is an impressive an impressive system working there. And then if that pivot effect, we're now well up over 100 mil at the back, typically for the ferry mode. Right, and off it goes for its test. So for the first time in a few days, the bay is actually empty as they go out, test all the suspension, test all the different settings on it, and then on the return obviously make sure everything's tightened, secured, torqued, double checked as part of the fitting process here at A&E Leisure. So, and there you go, that is job done, tested, test driven, tightened, cleaned off, everything's sorted, just in time for Debbie and Stephen to arrive back to collect their vehicle. And in fact, there's a really good example. See the driveway's on a bit of a slope here. Gary's backed it in here. It's in auto level function, so as soon as he's stopped, look what it's done here. Lifted the front right up, dropped the back right down. Fantastic. Leveled the vehicle out. So there's perfect proof that that the system is up and running perfectly well. And a really good system to see going in. Very interesting that. See the whole thing, a lot more, as I say, than I expected. Pretty complex operation over the days that we've been here. And the only thing that remains for me to to update you on is, of course, how much. So the system, the VB full air system, obviously it depends on your vehicle type. This was Alco chassis, Mercedes base, but of course with the gazillion different variations of vehicle, you would be looking in the region of between 7,000 and 9,000 to have full VB air suspension fitted to your motorhome here at A&E Leisure. So of course, if you want to know more about the fitting, more about the product, and indeed more about any of the other products that A&E Leisure can install for you here, be it the front coil springs and struts, be it the VB semi-air comfort that we had on ours, be it the full EP levelling system, then of course A&E Leisure, with the contact details below in the description for you, are the people that will help you. James and Gary here can field any of your questions, and I'm sure can point you in the right direction if you have any questions about the fitting of the system. And of course they could arrange for said system to be fitted for you. Thanks of course as always for watching. I hope that was of some use to you if you are considering full VB air, and it's been good to have you along. And of course do consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, because it won't cost you a penny. And we'll see you again very soon on the next film.